We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Hey folks, welcome to the Nerd Out With Me 90s Cast, a 120 episode journey through the 1990s, where every single week we advance forward 1 month through the 90s, talking about all the games and music and movies and all sorts of stuff that made the 90s the 90s. Tig will be joining us in just a minute. In the meantime, you can find us, of course, on YouTube, on the Nerd Out With Me channel at nerdoutwithme.com, and a whole bunch of other places. This week's episode is sort of a Frankenstein's monster episode that we've cobbled together from several different recording sessions. So hopefully you will bear with us. We're going to have a couple of segments where Tig and I were perhaps a little tipsy. We'll have a special secret guest, and then in our last segment we have Bootsy Spankins joining us. We're going to be talking about U2's Achtung Baby, as well as which came out in November of 1991, as well as U2's overall sort of journey and transformation over the years. This came from a session from an aborted project that we had at one point where we were going to do music night with Bootsy. You might have heard on some previous episodes where we gave you some of that stuff. So this comes from those sessions. But first, let's get into some news from November of 1991. Most importantly, Magic Johnson revealing that he had HIV. So come back in a moment. We're going to talk about that. So, whoa.
Are we calling that our sound check? Or?
I guess so, yeah. You automatically just ruined the audio. Thank you.
Always?
I guess so. We're here with a surprise guest, actually. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Robert.
There we go. So we're here with a surprise guest, Robert.
All right, now get out.
All right, I'll see you.
There we go.
Just get up.
I don't know if we need context for the Robert guest. Yeah, well,
He's a mystery. Robert is our mystery.
Here's what I'll say.
Mystery guest.
For the loyal listeners, they can figure out.
That's true, because if they were paying attention, they would know.
It's true. I think it was. I have a vague memory. It's really hard to remember though. Something was said on the Christmas special, right?
Yes.
Well,
and there was also
the Christmas special does not exist.
That's why it's vague. I can't fully remember.
But there was also the Die Hard. You popped in for Die Hard.
That's true. I was here for Die Hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
so astute listeners will know what's going on. Therefore, we'll just roll into the next subject. We are, of course, dealing with November of 1991. Tig, I'm sure you'll remember on November 7th, 1991, Los Angeles Lakers point guard Magic Johnson announced that he had HIV.
The HIV.
And he ended his NBA career.
Wait, he didn't stop playing when he announced it, did he?
That was the end. That was the end of his career.
I thought he played for a little bit before.
He did, yeah. He continued to play, but that was it. Yeah.
I'm not sure how draft picking works, but I'm assuming that probably affected it after the fact for him in the NBA.
Well, no, draft picking is when you're a student coming up out of school.
Okay.
So he was at the tail end of his career.
Okay, yeah, no, yeah, Metron's already into it.
I was going to say, too, he also was at the end of his career to this anyway. It wasn't like he had 15 years out of him, 10 years or 5 years. He was done.
Right.
But at the time, because of the hysteria of it,
misinformation.
Lots of misinformation. Which is understandable, because nobody understood what was going on and blah, 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 blah.
Well, and it was a big deal coming from him, because at the time, he, other than, Michael Jordan, was the biggest basketball player in the world. He was one of the biggest sports figures in the world.
Yeah. Yes.
It was kind of a big deal.
And he was the complete opposite. At the time, it was stereotypically homosexual men.
Right.
That had AIDS, drug addicts.
Right.
And then...
Don't hit the damn table.
I'm sorry, I know, I do it all the time. And then the only other people outside of that was the kid. What was his name? White? Something White? Remember the kid that got it from a transfusion?
There was a lot of kids.
Yeah, but there was a specific...
Yeah, I know that came up a lot,
There was a specific one kid who was the spokesman for AIDS.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
And he died because he had a blood transfusion. And then it was Magic Johnson. So it was sort of a weird... It was weird. Oh, somebody got it outside of this sphere of what everybody thought were the people that would only get it, kind of thing.
The social stigma.
Yeah.
Sure. The whole AIDS idea is kind of weird looking back in retrospect, not just the way we treated it then and we talked about it then, but also the way we think about it now, because now a lot of us, like me and you, and possibly even you, Robert, we kind of think about it as something that's past, right? Because the cocktail exists. There's this sort of
Treatment
cocktail
for it.
right?
You live in a first world country like the United States. You just
People can live this
with it, yeah.
complete and full life. I'm kind of curious about Robert's thoughts, because I know for us, you growing up in the 90s and so on, AIDS, it was a big thing, big deal. What like for you growing up, and even now, like going through college classes and so on, what is AIDS and HIV and all that stuff for you?
I mean, you don't really start the discussion until high school regarding any of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of not a thing that we do here. And even in high school, the discussion you get isn't really that great.
I would say, does AIDS fall into the STD category?
Yeah,
now?
essentially, they kind of sideline it almost.
It's just kind of lumped in with it all,
a little
like
bit, yeah.
syphilis and gonorrhea and all that.
It basically all falls under the same discussion that you always end up having, which is use protection.
Yeah, these are the things you could
could
get.
happen to.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
which is it seems weird because just through me being a human being alive and talking to people, I've come across the idea that this is a much bigger issue than we seem to give it credit for.
Sure. Well, because
even now,
unlike most STDs, it's one where you contract it, like you have to live with it in a much bigger way your whole life. Even though it's much more treatable than it used to be, it's not like it's curable.
Yeah. Keyword there being treatable.
Right. And like, let's say herpes, where you get it, you have it for life. Look, it doesn't impact your life in a big way other than
having to tell a partner that you have it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the occasional flare-ups of it.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Situations where it's weird because he helped the mainstream people realize that you could get it. Outside of that, small, where people were like,
big time, especially because he was a respected athlete.
Right.
He was a jock, so-called jock.
Right.
And
then and then from there it was the whole Tom Hanks Philadelphia Denzel Washington movie, and and like I said with the kid, which his name escapes me.
I still don't know the
You would know who he is.
I vaguely know what you're referencing.
Ryan
if
White
that makes you feel better.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in high school, they had brought in a speaker who had HIV, and he talked. It was one of these inspirational things, and I'm going to be a dickhead about it because
you were in high school.
Well, no, even now as an adult, all this inspirational stuff to me is just whatever, whatever. Go toss yourself in a lake.
It was an excuse to get out of class for 30 minutes.
But the one thing I do remember is after the class, he sort of hung around, and a lot of the students sort of came around, I'll go give him a hug and stuff. And I kind of felt, it wasn't a peer pressure thing. I kind of felt like not even as much to prove to him, but to myself.
That you could hug. Yeah, because at the time,
well, there was
that weird stigma of you could get it.
Well, yeah,
real easily.
Yeah, it was real weird because
I know,
nobody knew.
I know you Robert wouldn't understand or not understand, but not know this. But at the time, we really were it was drilled into our head for a while in the 80s, right? That you got AIDS anyway, sort of being in the same room.
Yeah, you
got AIDS anyway.
There was
oh my God, I shook hands with a gay guy. I got AIDS.
That's what happened, like I said, with that kid who I was saying, because he got it through a blood transfusion because they weren't screening the blood at the time.
Yeah, because they were sloppy as shit. Yeah.
So he was the reason they changed it. But that's what happened with him was where they found out he had it, and people were pulling their kids out of school because they were afraid that they would catch it from him.
Yeah.
It was that kind of weird stuff going on.
Which is a little weird because it's bodily fluid transmission. Yeah.
Right, but at the time, people were like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Could he spit? Could his saliva carry it? It was that whole weird. Could he sweat?
And that was it.
Get it from. People thought really it was going to be like a zombie apocalypse.
We got fed all this misinformation mouth kissing, like, tongue kissing.
Which again,
like,
though, you have to say is fair because nobody knew. And I understand it was above. It was hysteria.
It's not that nobody knew.
No one wanted to notice.
There was a time that nobody knew, but pretty quickly we knew the facts, but the real facts didn't get disseminated very quickly. At the time that we were having these things, like, my school gathering of, like, hey, which in retrospect, think about it really, hey, meet the dude with AIDS. That's what it was. That's what it was, which is kind of fucked up, really.
A little bit, yeah, if you think about it.
Meet the dude with AIDS, everyone.
But what's really...
But at the...
Yeah, no, go ahead.
But at the time, like, we as students should have known that, you can't get it by anything other than...
Yeah, but they had to keep telling you.
Like, screwing the guy, or, like, with open wounds, right? But that wasn't projected at us. That wasn't...
And it was pre-internet, so it was kind of like you had to keep drilling it into people's heads.
Yeah.
To get them to remember.
Yeah.
You had
and just to make them... Like, you might have heard it, but you needed to, for some reason, to hear it so many times that people eventually went, oh, you can't... Like, somebody had to go, oh, you can't get it that way, and you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. After the 10th time being told.
And even then, most people didn't care, especially in our area, because it was, a bunch of rednecks were like, well, facts get it.
Well, yeah, let's call a spade here. I'm sure a lot of the not actually informing people or people ignoring it is because of the homosexual thing.
Well, yeah, because
the majority of AIDS victims in that time would have been
urbanite. But this is the thing too. It was one of the first times that a movie helped not so much convince you that you couldn't catch it a certain way, but to put a face. Philadelphia really changed the way people looked at and went like, oh,
you've never seen that? Yeah.
They were like,
don't think I have.
Literally, oh, they're human.
And not only put a face to it, but it put Tom Hanks' face to it.
People.
Put Tom Hanks' face to it and Bruce Springsteen's voice to it, who at the time was like, the voice of America. Yeah.
It was definitely one of those movies where people were like, holy crap, like, okay, this poor bastard, like, but that was a big deal. And he still, you have to remember too, Magic Johnson's is infamous for the whole thing where they were like, oh, well, as long as you're rich, you won't die from AIDS. That was what was going on with him too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If you got money, you won't die of AIDS.
Because I guess the only other big name before him was Rock Hudson. Do you remember Rock Hudson?
Yep.
Yeah. And you wouldn't know of Rock Hudson, but Rock
do not recognize the name.
Rock Hudson, before you were born, hell, before we were born, he was like the Harrison Ford of before.
He was like this good-looking, but he was gay.
But no one knew.
But nobody knew.
Yeah, nobody knew.
Sort of
because that's how it was. Style kind of thing. That's how it was back in the day. No one knew.
So he was like this iconic, handsome man.
Yeah.
But then he ended up.
Do you remember as a kid when it came out, when Rock Hudson had AIDS, everyone was going like crazy about it, and I was sort of like, who? What?
Yeah, because we didn't grow up with him. We just it was more like we found out who he was because of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I remember my mom being like, oh, he was just like, he was a big actor. Blah, blah, blah.
I still, even as a film critic and guy who goes back and watches old movies and stuff like that, I still have no fucking idea who Rock Hudson is.
He was in some sort of skiing movie that I saw recently where he was like, but he was older in it.
Oh, skiing.
That's
cool.
Yeah.
Those skiing movies are big blockbusters.
He was like a jerk in a skiing movie.
Oh, we'll see. That's awesome. All right, so we've been at this for a little bit. We're going to come back in the next segment, and we are going to talk about a little bit of music before we get to some other music with Bootsy. So come back.
Before the next show starts, let's enjoy an intermission. You'll find our snack bar chock full of good things to eat and drink. Tasty, tempting hot dogs, thirst-quenching soft drinks,